Hey guys, this is Mitch with Finepoint CGI, and today we're going to continue our horror series and our inventory series by building a Resident Evil inspired object investigation system. So we're going to go through the process of building out our object rotation system. We're going to talk about how to actually hook it up to our inventory system and getting that set up. Then we're going to talk about how to actually create an investigation system where you can click on an item and have it appear in your inventory. So basically you can separate two objects and make them into two separate instances, kind of like a chest with like a key inside of it or something like that. So that's what I have in store for you guys today. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to actually plan this out. And if you guys want, you could just jump ahead to the next timestamp and you'll basically skip all of this planning. We'll get straight into coding. But I always like to plan things out as I kind of go. So let's design this out and then we'll go from there. So first things first, when we want to do an object investigation system, basically we need to open our inventory and then we're going to need to basically say, okay, once we have an item, we can right click on item, and then we're going to be able to instance that item. And we need to hide our inventory like that. And then from there, we're going to get into our basically a state. Okay, so we'll have a in investigation state. I know how to spell investigation. That's infestation. Apparently, Google doesn't know how to spell investigation either. So basically, we have open inventory, right click on item. We're going to instance that item. Then we're going to hide our inventory. We're going to be in our investigation state. So inside of our investigation state, yeah, I spelled it right this time. So I guess I'll just come into here. There we go. And we'll throw this guy up here like this. Inside of our investigation state, we're going to have a click to drag system, and then we'll have our investigation system. Now, our investigation system is going to be pretty simple. How that's going to work is we're basically just going to check, and then we're probably going to need to have a spawn. Inside of our spawn system, it's going to be pretty simple. We're basically just going to spawn our item, scene, and then we're going to check if there's any sub items. And then if any sub items exist, we will spawn those sub items. I'm going to have to make this much bigger if I'm going to be doing this like this. So there we go. And then we'll go to our end. We'll grab a little end block here. There we go. And that's basically how our spawn system is going to operate. Now for our investigation system, it should be pretty simple as well. So what we'll do is first I'm going to drag in an end just because I don't want to have to research for that. But first we'll have two signals. Mouse entered and mouse exited. Like that. And we'll have a mouse entered and a mouse exited. And what that's going to do is going to inform. Actually, I should probably put this like this. There we go. So if mouse over item, and if mouse click, then we will spawn our sub item. Then we will add our sub item like that. We're going to need to make this a lot bigger because this is going to be actually a bit bigger than I expected. So we'll drag this guy down here. So we'll add our sub item, and then we're going to do a quick check. If remove base item question mark, and if so, then we will delete our base item. Drag this guy in. Put this down. If not, we'll just clear it. And actually, I'm going to say add sub item to inventory. And then this guy will clear like so. And this guy will clear as so. And there we go. That's basically how this is going to operate. Our click to drag system will be pretty simple. If I zoom out a tiny bit, we'll just put this down here. It'll make life a little easier. Put this guy at the top. What we're going to do is we're going to say get mouse current position, get last mouse position, rotate object by mouse position minus last mouse. And then it'll basically just loop back like that. And then actually I'll probably check here, is mouse still down? Question. Go like that. And I'll just duplicate this bad boy, bring this down here. If mouse is not still down, and we will end. And that's basically the gist of our object investigation system. Unfortunately, it's going to take a lot more work than just this, but that's basically the gist of how this is going to operate. So with that being said, let's go ahead and build this. Okay, so the first thing that we have to do is we need to actually create our basically rotation object system, right? So when you do an object investigation system, much like Resident Evil, when you click on an object in the inventory, you can kind of rotate around that object and investigate it. And then much like Resident Evil, you can actually click on a section of the object and then it'll display that, hey, you found an object or something like that. So basically, we're going to be building out that feature. So to do that, let's first start building out our investigation scene. So we'll come up here, we'll click on the little new button here. We're going to go to a 3D scene and we'll just call this investigation object. And we're going to need quite a few things. So first thing that we'll need is a camera, because we're going to need a camera to determine that, hey, you know, we actually are looking at something or things like that. And I'll actually just pull this back on the Z-axis somewhere about here. And we can make this camera fancier later, but right now we'll just kind of put it right here. We're going to need a world because we need to be able to see what we're doing. And honestly, we could probably just click on here and add our sun and add our environment. I think that will work. And then we need to add in some kind of object to rotate around. So we're going to right click, add in a child node and add in a node 3D. And that's going to allow us to have some kind of object. And I'm going to name this as rotation around base. And that's just going to give me some kind of base to work with. Now, first things first, let's just right click our rotate around base. Let's add in a child node. Let's add in a CSG box 3D. That way we have some kind of object. Okay, so we can actually see an object. And I'm going to rotate this light to be something like this. And if we want to, we could actually connect our camera to this object so it follows the rotation. And that's something that we can do in a little bit, but I'll put it like this so we can actually see what we're doing. And we'll just set up our actual rotation system. Now, it should be pretty simple. If we come up to our investigation object, we're going to right click, attach a script, and type investigation object. And the reason why I retyped it was because I'm pretty sure I spelled it wrong here. I'm going to copy this and then rename this. And I think I did not save my script, so I'll re-add that and hit create. That was my fault. And we can get started with our actual investigation system. Now, first we'll do our rotation. So we'll come into our process function here, and we're basically going to set up our rotation. So what we'll do is we'll basically say if input dot is action, just press And in our case, we're going to do it when we click down our mouse. Now, I don't think we actually have something. Let me see. I'm going to check our project settings. We're going to go into our input map and let's take a look. I do have throw. We technically could use that, but let's create a new one called mouse down. And then we'll just come down here, click, and then just click on left mouse button. That'll make things a little bit easier because then we can actually have like a useful name here. So we'll just say left mouse down. I think that'll be a good name for it. We can come in here and just type left mouse down like so. And if we press down our mouse, then we can rotate. And I'm going to separate my rotation from my actual mouse down and mouse up. And the reason why is pretty simple. Basically, we're going to handle getting a mouse offset so that way we can rotate from anywhere on the screen and get a offsetted mouse rotation. So I'll show you how that works and I'll explain why that's important. So if we come up here, we're going to have a var is rotating, and we'll make that colon equals to false. And we'll come down here and say is rotating is equal to true. Else if input is action just released, mouse down, left mouse button down, then we'll say is rotating is equal to false. And then basically we can just come in here and check if is rotating, then we can actually rotate our stuff. Now, when we click down on here, we're going to want to keep track of where our mouse offset is. So we'll say var mouse offset is of type vector2, like that. And that will default it to a vector2, an empty vector2. So it'll just be a vector2 0, 0. And then we'll come in here and say mouse offset is equal to get tree dot root dot get mouse position, like that. And that's going to pull back an offset. So if our mouse is over here, when we rotate, it's going to take into account that mouse offset, if that makes sense. Then we'll come in here and we'll say mouse offset is equal to get tree dot root dot get mouse position minus mouse offset, like that. And what this is going to do is it's going to say, okay, from the center of our screen, so from about here to wherever our mouse is, take that value and set that as our offset. And then we'll come in here and then we'll rotate our object based off of that. So we'll hit $, rotate around base dot rotation degrees plus equals vector 3 mouse offset dot y comma mouse offset dot x comma 0 multiplied by some kind of value, which would be like a sensitivity value. So much like everything else, you need to have some kind of value here to say, hey, I want to move this object by X amount. In my case, I'm going to do it by 0.4. In my testing, that has been a pretty decent value. And then we will hit enter. Once we have that, we could reset our mouse offset. So mouse offset is equal to get tree dot root dot get mouse position. And that will basically set our mouse offset. I'm going to hit Control S. I'm going to put in the investigation object.tscn. That's fine. So we'll save that. And then you'll see if I hit play, like so, when I click and I drag, our object is rotated. If I click over here and I drag, our object is rotated at the exact same offset. If this wasn't set that way, we would rotate our object based off of our center to our mouse position, and that would cause a massive snap when we do our rotation. So that's how you basically do a nice, good rotation system. So if you're looking for basically an object investigation system that does this, that's awesome. So we basically have that at this point. Now we're going to add in the ability to zoom. So we'll come into our camera, we'll right click it. We're going to attach a script and type investigation camera.gd.
And I'm going to come in here. I'm just going to delete all of this because I don't need it. I'm going to say var zoom speed is equal to 0.2 because I know that in my testing 0.2 was a good value. I'm going to set a zoom direction. So var zoom direction. And we're going to make that equal to a vector 3, 0, 0, -1. And then we're basically going to set up our zoom code. So we're going to say func underscore input event if event is a input event mouse button and event dot button underscore index is equal to mouse button wheel up, then we'll translate our camera, our zoom direction multiplied by our zoom speed. And then we want to check the opposite, right? If we are zooming out like that, then we want to zoom out. So we can say translate zoom direction multiplied by minus zoom speed. And that'll allow us to zoom. So basically, we now have the ability to rotate and zoom. And I know what you might be asking. Okay, Mitch, why did you use function input here and process inside of your investigation object? Well, I'm tying this to my frame rate. I'm tying this to basically the event speed. You could do it this way, but the easiest way, in my opinion, to do zooming in and out is doing it this way. Now, you could set it up so that this just takes in, if I remember correctly, under project settings, you could add in a zoom mouse wheel up, and then we could probably come in here and go into my mouse wheel down like that, or mouse wheel up like that. And then we could just hook it up that way, and that also would work. I just did it this way because in my testing, this way is a little bit easier for people to kind of understand. And if we hit play, you can see we can now zoom. So we can rotate, we can zoom. And really, if we added in panning, we would basically have the Godot camera like this, where you use the middle mouse button to rotate and to zoom, and then if we held shift, we could pan. Now, I'm not going to run through all of that, but just know that that's something that you could do. Now, all we have to do is make it so that we can instance our item when we want to rotate around our item. So if we head over to our inventory code, so here's our actual inventory scene here, like this. If we open up our inventory code here and we take a look at it, there's a bunch of stuff here. So this might get a little bit difficult to follow. Hopefully not, but we'll see. So if you remember, we have an array of items. We have a capacity, hovered over, grab button. We have the ability to do left click, over trash, if I remember correctly, can swap. Something that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to have a state machine here. So let's add that in first. So we'll come up to the top and we'll add in an enum. And this is basically going to be called state, and it's going to house two different states. Since our inventory is now expanding beyond just housing objects, we want to actually make it so that it can be expandable in the future. So we'll say state inventory, comma, investigation. And basically that'll give us two states for us to work with. We're either in our investigation mode or we're in our inventory mode. And that'll allow us a nice good switch statement that we can use. Then we'll say var current state, and we'll make that a type state, and we'll say state dot inventory. And we're going to start off with inventory state. And it is not happy with me. So let's try state equals state dot inventory. There we go. And that should do it. And now all we have to do is when we come down here into our input events, we can basically just check to see if we're right clicking on this. And if we are, then we can actually pop up our object investigation. So if we come over here, you can see we have if mouse button released, grab button is equal to null. Now we can check if input dot is action just pressed. And in our case, we're going to want to do it with our right mouse button. So we'll come up to project settings. We'll add in a new action, call it right mouse down. And we'll come up here, click on right mouse button down, click on the right mouse button, hit OK, and then hit close. And then we'll come down here, we'll type right mouse button down. So if we press on our right mouse button, then we can actually start doing some stuff. So first things first, if our current state is equal to state.inventory, then we can actually do our inventory code. So what we'll need to do is we'll need to say, hey, whoever we're hovered over, we need to show that object, right? We need to instance that object in. But we don't want to do it if we're not hovered over anything. So we need to make sure we check for that. We have to check if hovered button does not equal null, then we can do our actual showing of our object. Now, here's where things will get kind of wrinkly. So I'm going to put a pass right here so we can talk about this real quick. So something that we're going to have to figure out is exactly how we want to handle this. You can see here in our scene, we have our inventory, we have our buttons here, which will go away once we finish up our inventory. But since we're doing an object investigation system, we need to determine if we want to have this object exist at all times, or if we want the object to only exist when it's called for. So when we need to, we can just instance it in and call it a day. Now, in my case, I'm going to just drag it in and make it exist. It's not that big of a deal. It's not a huge object, so I'm okay with just having it here. So we'll instance it in, and you'll see that we have it right here. Now, if we go into our inventory and we come in here, now we can basically grab a reference to that object. So the way our interaction is going to work is we're basically going to say, okay, we've clicked on the thing. Now we can show our object, and we'll pass in that object. So I'm going to hit $ investigation object dot. And we don't actually have a function for this just yet, so we'll create it. Show object, and we'll pass in our hovered button dot. If you guys remember, since this hovered button is actually a button, we have a current item. We could just type current item like that. And then we can basically add in this function. So we're going to copy that. We're going to go into our investigation object. We're going to come down here and say func show object, and we'll take in a object like that. And actually, I'll change this to item because it is an item object we're passing in, and I think it would be a good idea to do that. So first things first, it's always a good idea to hide this object here so it doesn't exist at all times, and we'll type show like that to make it so that it will show at that time. And then we should probably spawn our object. So we'll check if item does not equal null. And if it's not null, then we can actually go ahead and set up our stuff. So we'll say if item.resource path does not equal null, and our item.resource path does not equal empty strings, just in case somebody makes a mistake, you should always counter code just in case. You should say, hey, is this null? And is it not quotes? That way we have a little bit, easier time with it. Now, once we get here, we basically can say, okay, we know that we have an item. We know we have a resource path. And if you remember, item is just this inventory system item.gd right here. And you can see we have a class name item. So technically, if we wanted to, we could come in here and go item:item. And that would give us a little bit more flexibility there, providing that Godot's okay with me doing that. And once we know that we can show our item, now we can basically instance our item, right? So we can just say var instance is equal to resource loader dot load. And we could basically just pass in our item dot resource path like that. And then we can just instance it like that. And we should probably do a lowercase I since it is a lowercase I. So we could just instantiate it.
Now, once we have that, we need to actually add this as our child. So $sign. If I remember correctly, we called it $sign rotation around base dot add child, and we can add in our instance like so. And that will add our child to our base object. And then I'm just going to do some cleanup and make sure that it's safe and happy, happy to be there. So we'll type instance dot global underscore position is equal to a vector 3.0. And that'll basically just make sure it's centered to make sure that it's happy. And hopefully that will work. So if we refresh our inventory scene here, well, this isn't our inventory scene. So let me play my inventory scene and we add an item. You'll see stuff is broken. So let's take a look as to what's broken. Error calling signal on mouse entered, method not found. So I feel like something broke in here. Mixed use of tab and spaces. So that's probably what's blowing it up. So we'll do that, refresh it. There we go. We'll add in an item and then we'll right click it and you'll see that it instanced in our cube. Now it doesn't look like it actually instanced in what we expect 100%, but we at least have our cube instanced. Now what I'm wondering is if I look at our second item here, so I believe that was a item test 2. Does this have a resource path? It doesn't. So that might be why it blew up. So let's try this again. But this time, let's do an item 1. Let's right click it. Is this also null? Let me see. It is. So we'll need to actually add in some items for it to work. So let's come up here. Let's go to our models and let's go into our blockout and let's just drop something in that we know will work. So let me see. I think we could probably drop a floor object in. So we'll just drag floor into our resource path or not if it doesn't want to take it. Doesn't seem to want to take it. So I'll just copy this res, paste that guy in, and then let's try that and see what it does. So we'll add an item. We'll right click it and it doesn't seem to work. We don't have anything in our debugger that says it's blowing up. So that's not a good sign. But it's better than nothing. So let's see what happens if we go into our investigation object here. And let's go into our show object here. And then let's refresh. Add item, right click. You'll see that we are passing in an item. The item does not have a resource path. So that's not a good sign. So which one are we passing in? I always thought it was going to be one of these two guys, but it's possible that something else could be broken. Take a look at our button. When we do add item, what are we adding? We are bringing in test item.tres, and my resource path is once again null. I'm going to paste that in, hit enter, and then go from one to the other. Oh, I put it in the wrong one. That's why. Okay, that makes sense. So now it should, in theory, work. So if we come in here, added an item, right click, run it through, and there we go. So now we have our object. And you'll see that we actually have a cube here as well, and our inventory is getting in the way. So we have two things we need to fix. One, we need to get rid of this inventory so it's out of our way. And two, we need to make it so that we don't have anything underneath our investigation object. So the first thing I will solve is hiding the inventory. So if we come into our inventory code here and we take a look, so where we are spawning our button, so if I come in here and take a look, click and drag right here, we're setting our hovered over buttons, we're showing our object. We need to hide our inventory. So what I'm going to hide is I'm going to hide pretty much everything under here. Now what we probably should do is we probably should right click our inventory, add a child node, add in a control node, add in a control node like that, and then just call this inventory menu, and then probably just grab all of these guys and throw it underneath this guy. And we'll need to update all of our actual objects here.
And that will become kind of a pain, but it will be probably better off this way. So we'll just come in here, type inventory menu / scroll container. I'm going to copy this so I can reuse it. And we'll take a look at some of our stuff. So we have investigation object. I don't think that's actually under inventory menu. That's right there. Mouse area is fine. This one needs to be updated. Let's see. These guys need to be updated. And there we go. And hopefully our inventory will work. We have a crash, so we'll paste that guy in there. So now if we come back in here and we come down here, we could basically just hit $ inventory menu .hide like that, and that will hide it. And then we probably should just already set up our other state. So we'll just say else if current state is equal to state.investigation, then we'll just say the exact opposite. So $ inventory menu .show like that. And we'll keep it like that for right now. Now, something that you'll notice is when we do this, we're going to hide our inventory. So if we come in here, we select on our item, we right click, our inventory now hides, and we can drag this around. Now, something that is interesting is we have this object appearing up here. And the reason why is because the system still thinks that we are hovering over our menu. Even though our menu is hidden, it doesn't matter. The system still thinks that we are. We need to make sure we check for that. So if we come up here, you'll see that we have all of this stuff. So we actually need to come in and clean that up. So what I'll do is I'll just grab this if current state is equal to inventory, like so, then do all of this. And that'll help keep our stuff a little bit more organized. Providing I didn't break everything. Let me see. I missed one. Tab. There we go. And that'll keep our stuff a bit more organized. And then we can come in here and just say current state is equal to state dot investigation. And then we can do the same thing down here. So current state is equal to state dot inventory. And this is where we're going to pass in some of our cleanup code when we get there. Now, if we hit play, in theory, this should work. So if we hit add, right click, there's our object and we're good to go. Easy enough. Now, something else that we need to take a look at is how do we get it so that it only shows the one item that we instanced? Well, that's actually quite simple. If we head over to our investigation object code here, underneath our show item, we need to delete everything under our rotation around base. So I'm going to copy this guy. I'm going to paste it. I'm going to say if rotation around base dot get child count is greater than 0, then I know that there's stuff underneath that object. Now, all we need to basically do is just say for I in obj $ rotation around base dot get children, then we can basically just remove those children. So we can just do I dot do free. Now, this will work and this will work well, but if we have other reasons to delete objects under our rotation object base, we should probably make this into a function. Let's cut that guy out and just say func remove children, and let's pass in an object like that. And then we could just paste our code and just do obj dot get children, and then we could just pass remove children, and we'll just pass in $ rotation around base. And that'll basically achieve the same thing, but it'll give us a function that we can use to delete objects underneath our children. Now, something else, and I know that I'm kind of going down this gigantic stack of things, but something else that we should do is we really should start organizing this like a project. See, the big struggle that we're going to run into is if we continue down this path of just throwing code into sections,
it's going to make our code base kind of unmanageable. So what we should do is we should take this bit of code here. We should go into our file, new script, and just create a utilities.gd. And then we could just paste that guy in there. And we can delete this stuff right here. And then we can basically just save our utilities function. We can go up to project settings, auto load, and grab our path, go find our utilities function, and then name our node utilities. And that's going to give us a global variable. So now when we go into our investigation object, we can just type utilities.remove children. Now you might be asking, okay, but why would I want to do this? Well, in code, a lot of times you end up needing to do the same thing over and over and over again. If you have a utilities function, a lot of times that can make things a lot easier. Now, if I ever need to remove children underneath my character, I can do that. If I ever need to remove children underneath an inventory object, I can do that as well. I don't need to create a remove children function in every single script. I can just do it in one script and then reference that script because it's a global script. Now, once we have this, if we hit play, we can add an item, right click, and there is our singular item. If we right click again, you'll see that our inventory comes back and our object is still here, which is a problem. So we'll have to fix that. And it looks like we do have a break right here that we're going to have to look at. We'll have to see why it's broken, but that's something that we can figure out later. So when we right click and our object comes back, we should probably hide our other object. Now you'll see here, if we take a look at our inventory object, you can see inventory.show, current state is equal to inventory. We should probably create a function that hides our investigation menu. You can see we have show object. We should probably have one for hiding as well. We'll come in here, we'll type $ investigation object dot hide object, and we'll go from there. So we'll grab this guy, we'll copy it, we'll go to our investigation object, we'll come down to our functions, func, hide object, colon, enter, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say utilities dot remove children, and then I'm going to pass in my rotation around base, and then I'm going to bring in a hide, and that's going to hide the object from existing. Now if we hit play, we can add an item, right click, there's our object, we can right click, and now our object is gone once again, and everything is back to normal. And that's basically how we can do a very basic investigation system. Now, if you want just this system, there you go. You're pretty much good to go. If you want to style this a little bit better, you could come into your environment, you go into your background and change it to something like custom color and make it black. And that way, when you have your clear object, you can see it's black, or if you wanted like a nice dark gray or something like that, you could always do that, much like how Resident Evil does it, where you have that blackish background. That way you can look at your object and zoom in on it and things like that. So that's basically how you create that whole system. But now, how do we actually make it so that we can find an item inside of our object? So for instance, in Resident Evil, a lot of times you can rotate an object and then click on an element of an item and then receive that object as a separate object, and it'll destroy the other object, or it'll keep both of them. So how would we do that? So the best way to kind of handle this is basically by doing a lot of legwork. So first things first, we're going to need to update our objects so that they have the ability to have a sub-object, if that makes sense. So basically, since you have to be able to hover over an object, click on it, and then you would have to basically add an object, you need to have a sub-resource, like a sub-object, right? So to add that, you have to go into our item.gd here and make a quick adjustment. So we'll hit @export var
sub object, or maybe sub item, since these are items. And we'll make that into a type item like that.
Next, we're going to need to make some kind of investigation object. So much like we have this investigation object here, we need to actually create an item that can be investigated. Okay. So think of it kind of like this is the base scene that that object exists in. And now we have to create the actual item for test item. So for us to do that, we're just going to go into scene, new scene, and then we're going to create a new 3D scene, okay? And this is going to be our base object. So think of it kind of like if we have a chest with a key inside of it, this would be the chest. And then we'll also need to make the key. So we'll need to actually make both objects. And then we'll have to make the objects combined, if that makes sense. So what we'll do is we'll come in here and we'll put chest, and then we're going to right click, add in a child node, and we will add in a node 3D, and we'll call that node 3D sub object. Now this is where our sub object is going to exist. So the idea is that we can place this little position here wherever we want, and then that's where that object will instance. And then we'll right click our chest, we'll add in a child node, and we'll add in a mesh instance 3D. Now, really, code-wise, it doesn't matter how we do this at this point. It's whatever we want it to be. So in my case, I'm just going to make it a box mesh like so. And then I'm going to right-click my chest. I'm going to add in a child node. I'm going to add in some collision shape 3D. I'm going to click on my shape, and I'm going to make it into a box shape. And I'm going to make it match my object itself. Now, we'll come up to my chest. We'll right-click on it. And then we will change the type to a character body 3D. And that should just about do it. And we'll come up to our chest, we'll right click it, change its type to a character body 3D. And that will allow us just to have some kind of nice, well-rounded piece of code object that we can use if we ever want to animate this object or move it around or things like that inside of code. That it'll be useful for that purpose. Now, once we have our chest here, we can right click, attach a script, and let's create a script and let's call it inspection object. Now we have investigation object and inspection object. So there's a big disconnect here. We're going to have to figure out our naming convention here. So we'll get to that in 2 seconds. So we'll call this inspection object. We'll come over to our investigation object, and instead of calling this investigation object, let's rename this as investigation scene. I think that would probably be better. And let's come into our investigation object.tscn, and let's rename this as investigation scene, because that would make more sense for what it's actually being used for. There we go. And now what we can do is if we go back to our inspection object, let's come in and build out what we're actually trying to do here. So what we'll do is first we're going to house an item. So we'll say var item :item, and that's going to be the actual item. So that'll be something like test item.tres. So it's basically going to say, hey, what is our item? Our item is this. And that will basically give us that flexibility we're looking for. Next, we're going to want to determine if we're over top of the object, right? If we're over top of the way to find our key or over top of our actual object that we're looking for. So we'll say over key, and we're going to make that a Boolean. And then we're going to pass in a signal. So we'll type signal found item, and we'll pass in the item that we found. Now, once we've gotten to this point, now we can start building out our actual code. So first, we need to have a function that runs when we spawn our item. So we'll create that. So func spawn, like so, and we'll pass in a current item. That's going to be the item that we're actually going to spawn into our system. And we're going to update our item. So self.item is equal to current item, like that. And then, much like how we have our item here, so if we go back to our item.gd, you see we have a sub item. That means when our object spawns, we need to actually spawn in our sub item. if that makes sense. So if we go back to our code, which is right here, we can check for that. So we'll say if item dot sub item does not equal null, then we can spawn that item. So var spawned item is equal to resource loader dot load, and we'll pass in current item dot sub item dot resource path dot instantiate, like that. And that'll basically set us up so that way we can actually spawn our item when we can spawn our sub item when we spawn our main item. And now all we have to do is just add it. So $sign sub object dot add child, and we'll pass in a spawned item like that. And now we're going to need to come up with a rule. And what I mean by that is if we don't have a way to detect collision, we're not going to be able to do any of our code. So let's actually build out what a sub object will look like. So a sub object is basically going to be an object, but just a sub object, right? So if we right click our sub object and we add in a child node like so, let's make it a character body 3D and let's call it sub object. Then we're going to right click that guy. We're going to add in a child node. We'll put in a mesh instance because we need some way to define that object, and we'll make it into a capsule mesh. Now let's grab our sub object piece right here and let's move this out. And the reason why I'm doing that is so that way we can actually, look at our stuff properly. And then we'll scale this guy down. We're going to rotate it 90 degrees like so. So we'll say the key is kind of in the chest, if that makes sense. And we'll right click our sub object. We'll add in a child node. We'll add in collision, and we'll add in a collision shape. We'll make that into a capsule shape. And we'll just rotate it 90 degrees and let's scale it to match. So we'll just kind of bring it down like so. And then we'll bring it down like so. And there we go. Now, all we have to do is go into our chest, come in here and hit spawned item dot get underscore node, and we'll pass in dot connect. And what we're going to do is we're going to connect our node mouse entered and mouse exited. So we'll do connect quote mouse entered, comma, and we need to pass in some kind of function for it to run. So we'll put mouse entered, and then we're going to basically do the same thing, Control C, Control V on mouse exited. So EXIT exited, and then we'll grab our mouse exited. And then we basically just need to create functions for that. So we'll come down here and say func mouse exited like that. And we'll pass for right now. And then we'll do the same thing for mouse entered. And that should hopefully work. There we go. So now it's going to catch those guys and we'll be good to go. So now all we have to do is say, hey, when you exit this, over key is equal to false. Mouse entered over key is equal to true. And basically that means that our mouse has entered into the key. If not, then our mouse has not entered into the key. Simple enough. And if we want to debug that, we can just type print entered object like that. Or I guess in this case, it's exited object. So we'll just do that. And then we'll copy this, come down here, paste, entered object. That way we can at least look at our code and actually debug it. And then all we have to do is set up our process function. So our process function is going to be pretty simple. We're going to type func underscore process delta. And what we'll do is we'll just say if over key, then if input dot is action just pressed, left mouse button down, colon, then we can just do something. Okay. And in our case, all we're going to do is we'll say emit signal found item, comma, item dot sub item. So this is really cool, but what does this actually do? Well, basically, we have our item, we have our over key, and we have a signal if we found that item. When we hover over our object here, we go, hey, we're good. If they click on it, we can go ahead and actually give them that item. And then we check for that right here. So basically, if you're hovered over the item and you click, it's going to emit this signal, which will tell anybody that's subscribed to that they found an item. And in our case, what's going to be subscribed to it is the investigation scene, and that's going to tell our inventory that we found something. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm going to save this as chest.tscn, and that's fine. And we're going to need to actually save our subobject as a separate subobject. So let's right click, save branch as scene. Let's type key.tscn, and we will delete our subobject from existing because we don't need it to actually be here. And now we can come into our items here, and we can say, okay, this is a chest like that. And we'll rename this guy here to chest like so. We'll rename this guy here to key. And we will double click on it and change this to key. Much like how we've had our adding of inventory pieces, adding quantity of 1, and we'll change our stack size to actually 1. I think that'll be easier. We'll make it not stackable. And for the resource path, what we'll do is we'll actually just pull our key.tscn. So we'll just do that, Control A, Control V. And in our chest, we'll come in here, we'll add in our resource path. We'll basically just grab chest.tscn like so. And we'll change our quantity to 1 and our stack size to 1. Now, technically, if you wanted to stack multiple chests, you could. But in my case, I don't think we need to do that. And our sub item, we can just drag our key to our sub item. And there we go. And that should set up 90% of our code here. Now, if we go back to our investigation scene, when we do our instance, which is right here, we are actually showing our object. We can come in here and basically just run our spawn code. So we'll say instance dot spawn, and we'll pass in our item like that. And then we'll also connect our found item. So we'll say instance connect found item, and we'll pass that to a function that we actually don't have yet. We'll just type found item like that. Now we'll create that function. We'll come down here and we'll say func found item. And then we'll pass in an item like that. And I believe that's all we were doing here. Let's double check real quick. So when you find an item, item.subitem, so we're passing in a singular item when a object is found. I think we should probably adjust this to be multiple items. So we'll do item, subitem, and we'll also pass in our item as well. And we'll make that quick adjustment as well. There we go. And then we'll go back to our investigation scene and we'll say item, comma, sub item like that. And then what we'll do is we'll type show object and we'll pass in our item, our sub item like so. And that's basically going to show that object. Okay. So it's going to call out our previous instance. It's going to show our key. So the chest will get removed and our sub item will show up. And then we can just add the item to our inventory. So we can say get underscore parent dot add, and we can pass in our sub item like that. And then we can say get underscore parent dot add dot remove item. And we'll need to go up to our inventory and scroll all the way down and update these guys because we changed the name of these guys. So instead of test item 2, let's see, it's going to be test item and test item.tres. So we'll change that to chest. And we'll change this to chest as well. We'll come down here, change this to key and key. We'll hit play, add an item, and nothing seems to work. All right. So it looks like I actually found a bug within the inventory system. Now that's a little bit beyond the scope of this specific tutorial, but we'll just make our stack size 2 so we can test this. But it's kind of funky that you have to have a stack size of 2, and is stackable doesn't seem to be working. So I'm gonna have to take a look at that off camera and see how to fix it. But we'll come into our key.tres, we'll make that a 2 as well. We will hit play, and if we hit add item, we right click. So I think I figured out what was going on. So basically, if we go to our item, we have to drag our investigation scene back into our inventory. For whatever reason, it got removed, so we can hide that guy. We're going to click add item. We're going to right click, and you'll see that it's instanced both of our items. So basically, this chest doesn't have this item in it, right? It's only because it's a sub object does it instance. And hopefully, if we've done this correctly, we can hover over here and it should get detected, but it's not getting detected. You can see in our output, we're not seeing anything. That's part of the reason why I wanted to do it this way, was because if we look at our chest object, when we mouse entered, it should have fired off entered object, but it didn't. So that means that for some reason, our inventory must be eating our mouse input. Let's take a look at our 2D scene. Let's take a look at our inventory. And you can see that this covers our entire screen. So my guess is it's probably this that's causing it. So let's take a look at our mouse parameters down here. And you can see our filter is set to stop. So let's change that to ignore. And that should hopefully do it. So if we Control S, refresh, add an item, right click. There we go, entered and exit. See? So now we can detect our mouse. So awesome. So now we can click on it and we have a crash. So that's always a good sign. So we have non-existent function spawn and base character body 3D. My guess is this item here is our key. My guess is our key.tscn doesn't have a script. So we'll add that real quick. So we'll come up to our, if I remember correctly, our chest has a script called inspection object. So we'll do the same thing here. So we'll just add that in. So inspection object.gd. We'll hit Control S, refresh it, hit add, right click, click down like this, and then click. And then there is our item. So now we just found our key. Now if we right click, you'll see that we have our key and our chest got removed. Awesome. So that's how you do more of like a Resident Evil style investigation system, right? So you can actually find items inside of other items. Now, what happens if we want to keep both items? Well, that should be pretty simple. If we close this guy and we come down into our, I believe it's part of our investigation scene where we're doing this found item, we basically need to check if we want to remove the other parent, if we want to remove the parent object. So that means we have to add something to note that. So what we can do is we can come up to our item.gd. We can just add in a exported parameter that just says remove item after find or something like that. And we'll just say Boolean like that. Now, something else that we should probably check is, have we found our item? Because if we haven't found our item and our sub item gets clicked on and then we don't remove it after it's been found, and actually remove item after sub item found, I think that would probably be a more descriptive variable. What we need to do is we need to just make sure that if the item has been found, that we don't instance it again. So the user can't just continuously add that item to their inventory. So we'll hit export var sub item found, and we'll make that a type Boolean. Now, in general, I wouldn't have items that are investigatable like this, where you can find sub items. I wouldn't want them to be stackable. So personally, I would make this equal to false. But if you do want it to do it this way, then we'll need to do additional logic for that. But to handle this part, let's go over to our item investigation scene. And then we could just come in here and say if item dot, and I believe we called it,
go back to item.gd, remove item after sub item found. We'll come back to our investigation scene like so. We'll paste it, do that, and then go like that. And that should hopefully work. So now if we come into our chest real quick and we have this unchecked, in theory, if we hit play, well, I hit play on the wrong scene. So if I go to my inventory, I hit play, I add an item, I right click, I see my guy, I right click. Now I have both of them. But now if I right click on my item, you'll see that I once again have my sub item. So we're going to need to make a quick adjustment to our item stack. So if we go into our chest, we click on this guy. During our spawn here, we're actually adding a sub item. So what we have to do is we have to make a check for that. So if sub item does not equal null, and if item dot, and I believe it was sub item found, we'll say if not sub item found, then do the rest of this code. And then we can say when this signal gets emitted, here we can just find our sub item. So we'll say item dot sub item found is equal to true. And there we go. So now, hopefully, if everything's done correctly, this should just work. So we'll hit play. We'll add an item. We'll right click, click on the guy. We have our item. We right click. We have both of them. We right click again on this object. It's empty. It does not have our sub item. We right click on this guy, and we have our sub item. And awesome. Now, something that you might be asking is, what happens if I have multiple of an object? So if I add an item, I right click, I click, and I got a key, I right click, I add another one, you can see I have two, and I right click. Well, I'm not able to investigate that item. Or at least I'm not able to find another key. Because technically speaking, even though those objects are stacked, their state says, hey, I have found my item, right? So this would only work if you could only stack one on top of each other. Well, what we could do is we could just create a third object that exists. So you have your chest here, right? And you have your key here, right? If you wanted to, you could just create a third state, a third object, and duplicate our chest right here. So we can just right click it, duplicate, and then we'll just say chest combined like that. And then we could just change this icon to something that if we want to. In my case, I'm trying to think if we have an icon that I could use. I don't think we do. I should probably just start coming up with icons. So I'll just do this guy here, and we'll say chest as well. Its ID is going to be 1 because our chest.tres is 0. Chest combined can be 1 and key can be 2. That way they're all different indexes. And then we can have our sub item, and in our chest we can not have our sub item. And we could come into our item code here. So let's scroll up here and grab a at export var base item, and let's make that a type item like that. And basically our combined chest item, we come down here, chest combined, we can just drag our chest as our base item. So basically what that will allow us to do is we can have different stacks for different items. We can have the non-combined version, we can have the 2 non-combined items, and we can have the 1 combined item. And that would be a way around this issue. Now, I don't know if this is the best way to handle it, but it is something that will work for what we're trying to do. Now, if we do it this way, we're going to need to come in here and remove item after sub item is found. And we'll need to come into our investigation scene, and we'll need to just make a quick check right here where we say if item dot, I believe we called it base item, does not equal null, then we can just get parent, add our base item, like so. Or I guess item.base item, like that. And hopefully, if that's done correctly, that should just work. Now we should be able to just come in here, add an item, right click, and we don't have anything because our base item actually doesn't have the thing. So we have to come in here and change this from to chest combined.tres and to chest combined.tres as well. And we'll hit play. We'll hit add, right click. We have our stuff. We click, right click. We have our 2 items. We right click on this guy, doesn't have anything. Right click on this guy, doesn't have anything. Click add. We have an additional stack of that item. We right click. Now it's got the 2. We click, right click. Now we have 2 of both of those items. So that's basically how we can do an object investigation system, kind of like Resident Evil inside of Godot. Now I know that I have previous code that kind of goes with this because this is a continuation of our horror series, but I hope that this is a useful system for you guys. So if you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. Hey, if you dislike this video, go ahead and hit that dislike button because I'm here to make content for you guys. This video was a viewer suggested video, so if you have any suggestions, please leave them in the comments below and I'll be more than happy to add it to my Trello board. The board is a pretty large board, but I will definitely get to your tutorial as soon as I can. And hey, if you guys have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments below or hit me up on Discord, links in the description, and I'll be more than happy to help you out with any issues you might be having with your project. Next in this series is going to be a crafting system, so look forward to that. That should be dropping in probably 2, maybe 3 weeks from now. And I'm going to be continuing my 3D character controller, so look forward to that. But that is all I have for you guys today. So thank you so much again for watching. I'll see you all next time. Thanks.